is because of that strong, unified voice that we're able to bring from a variety of sectors. So it makes perfect sense to me that we do events like this joint luncheon. And we're happy to be doing this with the Great Lakes Commission. Of course, we work very closely with the Commission on a wide variety of things, not the least of which is the annual Great Lakes Day event that happens, and actually next year, I think it's February 23rd through the 25th, that we'll once again, the Great Lakes Commission will be there, as will Healing Our Waters, and we'll be talking to folks on the Hill. So long tradition of working together. Delightful to have everybody from the Great Lakes Commission join us for this lunch. And now happy to turn it over to my old friend Tim Eder to introduce our speaker today.
Thanks, Todd. So as Todd said, my job is to introduce our keynote speaker, and I'm going to do that, but I just want to start out by congratulating the Healing Our Waters Coalition on bringing together yet another fantastic crowd, and I want to wish you the best of success for your meeting over the next couple of days. The Great Lakes Commission just concluded its meeting, and as we emphasized last night at the reception that we had and at our meeting, our deliberations, the decisions that we make, the issues that we tackle are always richly informed by the great coalition of partners from federal agencies, local units of government, and especially non-government organizations like are so well represented here today. So we appreciate the partnership and the support, and as Todd mentioned, we've done some great things together, and we've seen some terrific progress, and that's kind of what I want to say in my introductory remarks about our keynote speaker, Chris Adamo. I'll give you the details of his background first, and then a couple of other quick comments. Chris was born and raised outside of Detroit, so he's very familiar with the Great Lakes region, and he's currently the Chief of Staff for the Council on Environmental Quality at the White House. Chris recently moved over to CEQ to help the Managing Director, Christy Goldfuss, and the team manage a number of priorities for President Obama, including issues on land, water, and climate change. Chris is now carrying forward much of the good work on Great Lakes restoration started by those in the administration before him. Before moving over to CEQ, Chris spent 10 years in the U.S. Senate, where he spent most of his time with Senator Stabenow from Michigan. For the last 4.5 years, he was staff director of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, where he helped pass the 2014 Farm Bill that enacted the largest and most comprehensive conservation title ever. He's originally from St. Clair Shores, Michigan, and so he's from the Great Lakes, where he returns as often as possible to enjoy them, with his family to fish, hunt, and spend as much time on the water as possible. Now that's the written script that Chris provided, but I just want to say that, you know, over the years of doing events with Healing Our Waters and the Great Lakes Commission, we have had the occasion to hear from the administrators of US EPA, other cabinet officials. There was a time several years ago where we had the chairman of the Council on Environmental Quality, but it's been many years since we've had a senior official from the White House to be able to join us. And so it's particularly appropriate at this time because the Great Lakes region, the Great Lakes community is enjoying terrific support and success from the administration and from Congress, and we're kind of at a transition point. You know, we've been at this for several years. This administration is winding down, and we're all going to work very hard to position ourselves well to sustain the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and the good work that remains ahead of us. But Chris has been at the forefront of a lot of that work, particularly during his time with Senator Stabenow. So we're very pleased that he's able to spend a little bit of time with us. But I think it's especially appropriate that we have the opportunity to hear from somebody at his level with this administration. Because let's face it, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative didn't just happen solely due to the Obama administration. It began because of the work of previous administrations, and especially due to the work of the states and all of the non-government organizations and the great bipartisan support that we've enjoyed in Congress. But we need to take a moment, and we should take a moment, to appreciate the terrific support that we've gotten from this administration, and we wouldn't be at the point that we are today without the continued support and cooperation from the Obama administration. And so it's particularly appropriate, and I'm really looking forward to having an opportunity to hear from Chris and to give you an opportunity to take credit for some of the success of this administration. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Chris Adamo.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Todd, and the Great Lakes Commission, Great Lakes Fishery Commission, Healing Our Waters, everybody. It's really, truly an honor to be here. This is, in some ways, returning home for me. I've only been gone out of Senator Stabenow's office a mere 4 months, but it feels like already a lengthy journey from the Senate, where I spent about 10 years. And, you know, for me, walking into this job at the White House, it was really an honor. It was a new adventure. It was something that it was not easy to leave Senator Stabenow's office, somewhere I really enjoyed working. She's a fantastic U.S. Senator. But it was an opportunity and a challenge that I just couldn't pass up. And part of it was the ability to maybe expand my horizons, see some new issues, working on lands out west, endangered species, Clean Water Act, a whole host of things that I've dabbled with and maybe could get more involved in, and then I found myself being pulled back into the Great Lakes world, and it's something that I'm very happy to be dragged into. So being the Great Lakes guy on the staff or the White House and the team is an honor, and is one that is a little nerve-wracking at times here, but you guys have set up a course of progress and a course of action here over the last 6+, 10+ years, in particular, well, just Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, that you're going to make my job quite easy, quite frankly. You all are doing wonderful, wonderful work, and I want to assure you that the White House and the President and the team there are paying very close attention to this work. I'll get into a little bit more of that in a bit, but I want to just do a couple quick things here today. Talk a little bit about, you know, everybody has their own experience with why the Great Lakes matter and why we do the work that we do. I want to talk a little bit about that and how that ties into the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, some of the key accomplishments that we see being made. And there are so many, and I'm going to unfortunately have to gloss over them a little bit. And then also try and tie that into some of the broader work we're doing across this administration right now on conservation and climate issues. And there's so much going on. You know, we are very excited, as the President likes to say, it's the fourth quarter. And we are planned to win, and we're going long, all sorts of sports analogies here, on really driving a huge number of conservation successes. And, you know, climate change tends to get the headlines, and it's deservedly so. We are doing a lot along those lines, but this really ties into a whole host of conservation activities that really are just incredible, and I'm very fortunate in my job that I get to see so many of these across the nation right now. But I think what's going on right now with Great Lakes and Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, it's truly a model of success and collaboration that really can be learned in other areas, and I think also is an example of what we're trying to promote in other areas. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I apologize. I had this great speech written, and my computer bonked out on me this morning, so this is what I'm going off of. But sorry, I usually wing it anyway. I'm a communication nightmare. You know, I can't help but comment a little bit. I had this great quote picked out, which I don't have in front of me now, but the weather today, just let's start with that. This is Great Lakes weather. This is cool stuff. It's ominous, it's cloudy, it's gray, it's a little chilly compared to yesterday, and I love it. It's fantastic. It makes me feel alive. You know, DC swamp weather is just awful. This is stuff that I miss, I long for, believe it or not. I mean, summer is easy. Summer's a cakewalk. This is the stuff that makes you feel invigorated and really ready to go and be a part of it all. And the quote that I had was from my favorite Great Lakes author, which I'm terrible at quotes, so I'm not even going to try and paraphrase, but I'll just try and set the scene a little bit. If you haven't read Jim Harrison, do. That's my suggestion of the day, my recommendation of the day. He is a fantastic writer, writes a lot about Michigan, writes a lot about the lifestyle of, I think, he doesn't say it this way, but I would interpret it as the lifestyle of the Great Lakes. We have our own culture here. We have our own way of living, and for a lot of people not familiar with the region and our amazing resource, it's hard to really put that in the words. I mean, I'm torn by this. When I'm in D.C. and I'm talking to my friends, part of me is like, come to Michigan, come check it out, come check out the beaches. The sand is whiter, it's finer, it's so much better than the Mid-Atlantic beaches. Sorry, guys, but and then part of me will stop and say, well, you know what? You don't have to come. That's all right. I kind of like it to myself when we go back. And there's a certain peace and solitude here that is sometimes hard to find on the East Coast in particular. But more than that, I really just want to talk about what Harrison would set, and the scene he would set with this weather is stumbling along the forest as it meets the dunes out by Grand Marais and Lake Superior. And if you haven't been to that part of the world, again, it's a very iconic area, I think, right where Pictured Rocks kind of ends and meets Grand Marais there. And there's a whole host of dead trees, as I recall. And I don't even know if that's exactly where he walks, but that's where I picture Harrison walking through the woods. And he might have a gun in his hand and a bird dog out in front of him. And, this is the weather I picture. This is the waves crashing in, the gray in the sky, some storm hovering in. And it's just a scene and a feeling that I personally don't get many other places. And I like a lot of other places, but this is special to me. So, enjoy the coming fall. It's a great time of year. But with that, just talking about why this is important, and again, going back to this Great Lakes way of life, or this Great Lakes culture that is so, I think, unique, and we should be proud of it, and I know probably everyone in this room is, but sometimes I feel like we don't always talk about it that way, and this truly is about a quality of life for us. I mean, we are doing this. I mean, what's so fantastic looking out into this room and having worked with so many of you over the years is that this is a diverse crowd. There's a diverse set of interests out there. This isn't just about protecting our water. This isn't just about having a place to recreate, although it's a darn good one to do that. I mean, this is about our everyday life. This is about our everyday communities, and this is about us having a better life. And growing up, it was actually a paradox for me. I grew up in St. Clair Shores, and for those of you who know it, we like to consider ourselves the nautical mile and the epicenter of boating, I guess. I could literally hear boats out my window sleeping at night as a kid, and yet I didn't have access to that lake. We didn't have a boat growing up, and I'm not trying to sob stories here. It's just the fact is, it's kind of ironic that you live so close to the lake, but you just can't sometimes access it. My learning of this area and the lakes actually started on a little lake. It started on a little lake that was actually an impoundment that led into the Little Muskegon River, which then, of course, goes into the Big Muskegon River, which then, of course, goes out into Lake Michigan. And that area was my learning. That's what got me into why I do what I do, why I love conservation issues so much. And, whether it was catching bluegills off the dock, chasing the largemouth bass, whatever it was that I was doing with my dad and brother, learning about the loons, the muskrats, all that stuff that so many of us enjoy being exposed to, that's what started my exploration. And I think so many of us have that shared experience, and it doesn't have to be the up north experience. It can be the southern Michigan urban interface with the water resources. It can be that park system that you get to go take a hike into, and that is all a part of our Great Lakes experience. And so I just find that diversity and the interest that collide with it to be just so fascinating, and it's one of the reasons why this effort around Great Lakes restoration, I think, has taken off so well. On one hand, massive challenge, so many different issues. I mean, what if we only had one set of issues to really prioritize? What if it was only non-point? What if it was only just areas of concern? But no, we have all of these issues: invasive species, various habitat issues, endangered species. It is no easy feat to keep this collaboration and this restoration initiative going, but yet you all do that, and you're to be celebrated and commemorated because it is something that is going to cement a legacy, not just for the president, not just for this administration. As Tim mentioned, a lot of work has gone into this before our administration, but we are on, I think, a very interesting time frame here where we can kind of cement this work and make sure that whoever the next president is, whoever the next administrator of EPA is, that we continue to do this amazing coordination. So with that, I just want to tick off a few things that caught my eye that I think are just fascinating accomplishments of the past 5 years alone of Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And many, many challenges ahead, but some very interesting ones. First of all, areas of concern. There are so many challenges with areas of concerns in the communities that reside in those areas. But we have already delisted approximately 5 or so, and we're working towards adding a couple more over the next couple of years. We've erased 42 beneficial use areas, as I recall. This is significant work, and this is work that was not happening anywhere near the scale that it is today prior to 2010, 2009, at the beginning of this effort. So that is some significant progress. And again, it's not necessarily, this isn't necessarily about picturesque dunes and wilderness areas up along Lake Superior. This is in the backyards of significant populations where families are raising kids and teaching them to really access and enjoy our resource for the first time. So incredibly important work. Also, invasive species. While we have so much ahead of us, whether it's Asian carp or purple loosestrife or Phragmites, and many others, of course, we actually haven't had a new invasive since 2009, and I believe maybe not an aquatic invasive since 2006. This is because things are coming together. We have monitoring systems in place. We have coordination systems in place. The threat is not going away, but we'll continue this vigilant effort with our federal family and the states as well. Habitat, over nearly 900 new habitat projects across this entire Great Lakes region over the last 5 years. And whether it's 900 or 1,000, 1,500, regardless of the number, that really doesn't tell the story. But this is difficult work. This is real conservation on the ground, get your hands dirty sort of work. I always try to explain to people sometimes that conservation is not, it's not just watching the grass grow. It'd be nice if it was, but unfortunately a lot of it, this is re-engineering habitat, this is getting out there and designing a wetland and thinking about adaptive management and all this fun, cool stuff that we have to do, but it's not easy. So, 875 projects over the past 5 years, that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of critters, and that's a lot of cool new vegetation, and maybe here and there some new places to play as well. Also, I was reading through the report of the last 5 years, and one of the things that's captivated my attention over the past year, I don't know if anybody in here has watched Damnation, the documentary. Another recommendation. I wasn't planning on this one, but I'll throw it out as well. Damnation might be one of the coolest documentaries I have seen. Whoever put it together, they just did a fantastic job of telling a story and making you feel excited to go try and do some very good conservation work. That was primarily about, it was dams all over the country, but it was focused a lot on the West. Actually, it turns out the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative might be one of the biggest dam and barrier removal policies we have in the federal government right now. Nearly 500 barriers removed within our system, freeing up all sorts of tributaries for fish and wildlife and perhaps recreational use, and just, again, allowing all of us to enjoy the resource even that much more. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more work of that ahead as we look at abandoned and orphaned dams across the region. So very cool stuff, probably not a well-known fact for many. So many different things going on out there, and those were just, again, a quick few. These are the kind of things that as we sit in the White House and look at how things are progressing and where stories need to be told, these are great narratives. These are great people stories. These are great stories about people valuing and getting better access and enjoyment of their resource again. And so this is something that we'll be looking to do even more over the next year, is just lifting up these stories, which are so important. My cheat sheet here that I scribbled on. Another thing that I'll quickly mention as I try and get into what we're doing as administration of a whole, maybe a little bit outside the Great Lakes region, we talk so much about climate change, and of course it comes down to reducing fossil fuel use and reducing air pollution, with the Clean Power Plant plan being the centerpiece of our climate work right now. Obviously a lot to do on the international front as well. Another piece, the third piece of the President's Climate Action Plan, is called climate preparedness or climate resiliency. And this means a whole host of things. It can mean local state planning, thinking about how we do our infrastructure projects so that it's climate resilient in the future, thinking about ways to use natural infrastructure instead of cement and concrete at times, whether it's flood management or barrier islands in the Gulf, or there's a whole host of different ways of thinking when we're thinking about climate resiliency. Part of our job right now is to integrate this type of planning and thinking across all our federal agencies and obviously trickle down to the states and local communities. Turns out Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and a lot of the work around there probably is all climate resilient work. This is about making sure our systems are more prepared, more able to withstand some of the changes that may be coming in the future. And so I just want to, and actually we talk a little bit about that in some of our federal reports over the past year. And so this is actually, you guys, again, to be commended for this. So this is something that we are struggling with in other areas to get people to acknowledge the Great Lakes community is doing it. This is amazing climate resilient work and will continue to be for the years to come. With that, I think I obviously would need to talk about a couple elephants in the room. There's so many issues and some of the successes that I just mentioned. Obviously, a few of the looming threats looking forward here. Asian carp will continue to be an ongoing work in progress. We all know this. I think you heard from the Army Corps over the past couple days, yesterday and this morning. We'll be working with them hand and fist to figure out how we draw this line in the sand at Brandon Road. And for better or for worse, Brandon Road has become our point where perhaps terrible analogy here, but this is our moat that we're building around the castle. And we, for better or for worse, have to figure out how to do it well and do it quickly. And so we will be working with our federal partners on that in the coming months and years, as I'm sure all of you will continue. The other elephant in the room, non-point source pollution, which obviously many of our watersheds are struggling with, 2 or 3 in particular. Lake Erie obviously being the one that catches a lot of attention, obviously the Fox up in Wisconsin, and probably Saginaw Bay being the other third one that would come to mind. This is not easy work, and this actually is something that I've worked on quite a lot over the last 4 or 5 years as I was working in agriculture issues and conservation for the Farm Bill. The bottom line is we have to engage our farmers at a scale that we never have before. And this isn't about a particular type of farming, this isn't about a particular type of farmer, but this is about making our producers more capable and more aware. And most of these folks want to do it, but we're talking about thousands of little businesses strewn about the landscape, so this is not easy work. And the bottom line is, not to be overly pessimistic here, but if they were all do 100% more conservation tomorrow, this problem's not going away, as many of you know. It's going to take years and years of work to reduce the phosphorus load out of the land and out of the lake. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but there are really great glimpses of hope here. One of the successes already with Great Lakes Restoration Initiatives, we've increased our conservation enrollment at the producer level by 70% in these key watersheds. That is an extraordinary number. We will continue to spend a lot of Farm Bill resources in a very targeted manner, which is somewhat new to our ways of thinking in the conservation and farm world. But through a program that I was very proud to be a part of in the creation of, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, this is just getting off the ground. And many of you may know of this, but we have efforts in Saginaw Bay, we have efforts in the St. Johns, and we have efforts in, of course, the tri-state area of the Maumee Rivershed, Western Basin, Lake Erie watershed. And again, it's going to take some time. I mean, we may all be getting together in a couple of years and wondering, well, where are the reduction in phosphorus? And but we need to look at the progress that is. There are solutions out there for producers, and I truly believe, I'm truly hopeful that producers are going to be increasing their conservation enrollment even more and looking at some very innovative solutions that are out there that work with working farmers, and that is an important piece of this, because this is not about taking land out of production all the time. This is sometimes just giving them more tools and more financial capabilities to put some great conservation pieces into their daily production and businesses. So very excited there. It's a daunting challenge, but I feel hopeful about some of the great efforts going on there, and we'll continue to monitor them and work with some of our friends at Department of Agriculture and the states as well. With that, we are a little transition here to a national scope. Obviously, climate change will continue to be a big thing, but I want to talk more about just conservation thinking in general, and this is something that there have been decades in efforts to think about how we can collaborate. And though you probably have heard, how many times have you heard the word collaborate or partnerships over the past 24 hours? And you probably, what does that mean? And it gets used different ways, and it means a lot of things. But the bottom line is, when I got into this game, at least about 10 years ago, that was the innovative talking. That was how do we do this? How can we, instead of just throwing some regulations on people, how do we encourage folks to come together, think about this holistically, look at it from a landscape perspective? This is stuff that's taken a while to become a part of our vernacular, our everyday vocabulary, and it's exciting stuff. And we've got things, the Great Lakes alone is one of 5 presidential priority ecosystems. You may or may not know that, but obviously we have the Bay, Chesapeake Bay, the Everglades, the Gulf, and Sacramento Bay Delta. Those are the big ones. There's a handful of others that we are working on as well, but those are the 5 big ones. And they are all different models of collaboration, all different models of leveraging non-federal, non-government resources and efforts. And we are so far along, so far ahead of where we were 10 years ago on all of these watersheds. And the amount of people and the amount of resources that are coming together, and this is, the federal government can't claim, victory for all of this, but we have to think differently, the states have to think differently, you all need to think differently, everybody's got to pitch in. This is about bringing more conservation dollars to the table, non-government included. This is about bringing more people to the conservation table, which is sometimes been a challenge. This isn't just businesses and environmentalists. This is everybody. This is communities. And so I think what we're seeing now across the landscape are all sorts of these different partnership and collaborative models popping up. And they happen in starts and fits, but they're really doing some fantastic work. I'll give you a non-watershed example of one that just was more formally announced last week, which is our sagebrush ecosystem out west, which encompasses about 11 states. And sorry, this has nothing to do with water. In fact, there's a lack of it out there in most of these places. But the reason I bring this up is that we are talking about a landmass area of over 70 million acres, and that is a mix of private, federal, and state lands, just to make it that much more complicated. And if it were a state, it'd be about the 7th or 8th largest state in the nation. So this is a big, big area. And this is about the sage grouse, and this is about whether or not that bird is an endangered, threatened, or doing well species. And we decided not to list it on the Endangered Species Act. So you may think, well, that sounds like the bird's doing just fine. Well, there's a lot of work still to do. The reason we were able to not put it on the Endangered Species Act, and we'll have some critics out there on this, but I will stand up for it and say we are getting more conservation done, and we will have more commitments to do more conservation over the next coming years because we did not list that bird. We used a collaborative process that was led at the federal and state level. We're bringing in over 4,000 ranchers already enrolled in conservation practices. We have state plans in place. We have over 98 different federal land management plans in place that will all raise the standard of conservation across that landscape. This is a massive, massive endeavor that, again, break it down, basic partnerships, bringing in non-governmental resources, looking at different areas of the federal government, including the Farm Bill, to look at how we can pay for these activities. This is a massive, massive landscape plan, much like some of our priority watersheds like the Great Lakes. So we're seeing more and more of these sorts of efforts pop up. Folks are learning from each other. Organizations, many of them are in this room, are working in different aspects of these different models, and we're sharing information and we're learning more. We are going to continue to do that, and I find this very exciting. It makes me hopeful that we can achieve a lot more in the coming, not just obviously the remaining 16 months or so of this administration, but whoever that next president is, these are the models that will endure, and so looking forward to seeing much more of that. I'll quickly conclude and then maybe open it up for a little bit of question and answer, but I do want to say this. When I started with Senator Stabenow, it was 2007, and I think the Brookings Institute report fell in my lap then, and I eventually got around to reading bits and pieces of it. And we're well on our way to implementing some of those recommendations. We have significant dollars at hand. There's never enough dollars out there to do the work we need to do, but we're making very good use of it. And on behalf of the White House and the President and CEQ, I just want to thank all of you for your good work. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to hear your wonderful comments, and I particularly like that sense of place feel that you obviously have and share, all of us that grew up here in the Great Lakes region. So always great to have you come back and share your thoughts with us. We do have a little bit of time for Chris to take a few questions. We have a couple of staff with handheld mics, so if you've got a question for Chris, raise your hand and we'll connect you up with a mic and have him add a few more thoughts.
Just mindful to be kind. Again, unauthorized from the communications office today that I'm doing this. So. What do you got?
Okay, Chris. Lynn McClure, National Parks Conservation Association, and one of the co-chairs for Healing Our Waters. As you're going into this winding down of the administration, how can we best help you in quantifying the kinds of victories that the GLRI has been able to deliver?
That's a really good question, and I think there's great reports out there. EPA and all the federal family just issued a very good report to Congress and the President on the past 5 years, and it's a fantastic work. There's great metrics in there. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative 2.0 plan is out now. It's explaining what we're planning to do with goals and with metrics for the next 5 years, which I think is fantastic. This may be just maybe the simplest answer is really, let's all work on our narratives. Let's all work on our storytelling, whether it's through social media, whether it's through traditional press or TV. I think getting people who, whether it's reporters, government policymakers, you pick your audience, but getting them out to the locations to see this work, I think, is absolutely vital. Yesterday, when I was at the Great Lakes Interagency Task Force, 2 of the agencies did a virtual tour of different projects that they were particularly proud of. One was USDA and Forest Service looking at different reforestation efforts in urban areas and how that was helping with non-point. Charlie Woolley with Fish and Wildlife Service did a fantastic presentation with Army Corps on some work on some islands off, I think it was Green Bay and Wisconsin. And they were amazing. We just had pictures, we had great stats, they did a fantastic job of presenting it. And those were virtual tours, and I felt like that was really strong and powerful, and I think everybody in the room was even wowed by it. But just think if you take the non-conservation audience out to see some of that work, it's absolutely mind-blowing. I'll never forget the first time that I saw a wetland restored, and I think it was actually with Healing Our Waters, actually on a wetlands tour, seeing different stages of wetland regeneration and restoration, and you just can't really appreciate the resources and people power that go into these sorts of projects until you get out there on the ground. And so I think thinking about, you all spend so much time reminding us either at Congress or in the executive branches of what you're doing and what your needs are, and that's great, you have to do that. But then there's another side of this, which is taking the non-traditional audience, people out there in our region, and showing them the good work we're doing, because a lot of just average folks may not be aware of all the good work going on. You guys are letting me off the hook.
The administration can help with GLEPA in the hearings tomorrow, moving forward? Well,
I know that Chad Lord, where is he? He's going to be testifying, and I saw the testimony from our friends at EPA and the USDA. There'll be some others that I can't recall off the top of my head right now. The testimony looks good from what I've seen so far. I think everybody is saying more or less what I just said. Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, it's working. Here are some of the successes. Here's our plan moving forward. I mean, bottom line is we look like we have our act together, and that's great. I think it'll be interesting to see if there's any particular scrutiny raised tomorrow from our friends over in the House of Representatives. And last year the House passed the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative bill to authorize it permanently, but they did it without the traditional process. We really don't know necessarily how some people felt. So we'll, I think, listen and learn from any comments raised. Another good point of news is that the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, did a report recently, and these are the guys that come in and they're always looking for little things to scrutinize our work on. Pretty innocuous report, pretty favorable to all the work, and our friends over at EPA were very excited about that. It's very rare that you get a GAO report that says, keep it up, more or less. So I expect the hearing to go well. We'll just have to kind of keep our eyes and ears open for any particular concerns raised.
Judy Beck with the League of Women Voters of the Lake Michigan region. And you've talked about the successes and how wonderful it is to see them. But at the same time, some of the GLRI money that was put into stewardship and public participation seems to have hit some roadblocks. And so the good news, it needs to get out there, not only in social media, but you need to get people out to see the resources, and you've got to get out to the different groups all around the basin, and on a continual basis. Not everybody can be at this meeting, no matter how good it is, and I've, from time to time, have actually watched it on, Detroit Public TV, and that's wonderful, and webinars, but how can we preserve some funding to make sure that the good things that have been happening can continue?
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't know off the top of my head the specific issues with some of that funding obstacles. I know you're probably speaking a little bit just of the decrease in GLRI over the past year, and perhaps I think that lowered some of the outreach and educational funds that were being allocated in the past. So I think some of those areas may not have seen what they saw in some of the early years of GLRI. I think first of all, you're doing the right thing, which is you're making the case right now to Congress and about why GLRI funding needs to stay up at a certain level, and that's good work. I feel actually pretty hopeful that the dollar amounts will be at least at we'll probably not reach the numbers that we saw in the very early years, but at least at a very solid number. So I think working with our friends at EPA and the agencies to make sure that they need to know what the needs are and make sure that we can fight for that allocation. And something I can ask EPA to learn a little bit more about too.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Tomandel. I'm a dairy farmer from Wisconsin. Watching things over the past couple of years, President Obama has mentioned a number of things in some of his different speeches, in not only regards to the Great Lakes and being a concern. There's beginning farmer issues, which are a huge concern also, and trying to figure out how to address that. And just the community development and environment and things. There's also the idea of empowering the labor force, and he's talked about formalized apprenticeship a fair amount too, which you don't see any in agriculture. One of the things I do besides farmers, we have got an apprenticeship program to train dairy farmers. So we've been working with the Federal Department of Labor, and as of about 6 months ago, we became the first fully accredited apprenticeship program in the nation in agriculture. And the unique thing about it is we're targeting beginning farmers, so directly to train them through formalized apprenticeship program. The real cool thing is that we're training them in managed grazing. So it's a platinum level best management practice in regards to non-point solution. So I guess I'm curious to see, we've got some real opportunity to involve not only government, but non-government organizations, foundations, private money, and industry. Who do I talk to about this? I think we've really got the potential for a national effort here that can hit all of these high order topics. Yeah,
that's a great point and a great question. Secretary Vilsack, USDA, has spent a lot of time talking about beginning farmers and how we can reinvigorate some of our farming populations with some young newcomers. The Farm Bill, we try and beat around different edges. We'll offer different financial incentives, whether it's conservation incentives, loans, things like that, especially for beginning farmers and ranchers. And so there are a lot of those resources out there. It can be a challenge sometimes because they're spread in different offices. So you may have to go to your rural development office in the state capitol, or you may have to go to the FSA office. You may have to even go to the NRCS office. So 3 different trips to, unfortunately, sometimes get those answers. Your land grants, often with extension, trying to develop, maybe they can look at some of the work they're doing right now to try and expand that apprentice program. The resources are there, I think, more often than not. They're always a little scarce, but they are there, and I think just getting the coalition of people around it at the local area to say, yes, this is something we want to push is sometimes the biggest impetus that we see. But I can tell you, at least at the DC level, at Department of Agriculture, they are 100% behind what you're talking about. I've heard the Secretary himself talk about apprentice programs. It's not really a formalized federal program per se, but if you have the model, that's all we need, and we can start working with land grants and our USDA offices to start promoting that. I think that'd be fantastic. I'm happy to talk offline more with you to brainstorm a little bit.
Hi, Christy Meyer with the I'm right here. Sorry.
I was looking.
Hi, Christy Meyer with the Ohio Environmental Council. You talked about building a moat around the castle, right? And about Brandon Road Block. And I'm wondering, do you see that as the end goal, or is that an intermediate step towards the end goal?
Hard for me to say, quite frankly. I think first and foremost, we got to look at the study. We got to figure out what are the options there. That is, before we look too far ahead, that's the first and foremost question before us. There's so much that we need to do there in terms of looking at various management activities, various engineering opportunities, that if we don't look at that, the long game might be a moot point at that, at a certain point. So looking at Brandon Road first, I think makes a lot of sense.
Hello. Hi, I'm Jane Elder with the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters. My question is, since the Supreme Court ruling on mercury, what might our strategies be? Here in the Great Lakes region, we still have in every state fish advisories for mercury contamination, and I'm hoping the Clean Power Plan will make some difference there, but does the administration have other strategies to sort of pick up where we left off with mercury?
So I'm sorry, your question is what other strategies? Yes. I'll be frank, I don't have a very good answer to your question. That's something I have to go back. I'm happy to follow up with you and talk a little bit more. I think right now there's so much focus on utility policy, energy policy, reducing our dependence on coal through the Clean Power Plant rule, and that's really where a bunch of our focus is on. But I'm happy to follow up with you more on specific mercury policies that may be a little bit more specific than that.
We can take one more question. Thanks.
What is the fate of the Land and Water Conservation Fund?
That's a great question. As of tomorrow at midnight, it expires. I'm sorry. So a gentleman asked, what is the fate of the Land Water Conservation Fund authority? And as you know, this is 30 plus years old. It's actually a huge priority for us right now. I probably spend more phone calls and emails a day talking about this with our friends on the Hill than I care to. We are trying to find a way to work with Congress to reauthorize it, but it's in Congress's hands. They have various proposals out there. There is some strong opposition, unfortunately, especially in the House. I think the Senate is a little bit closer to agreeing on a path forward there. We are hopeful that in this short-term funding fix for the government to keep it open for the next couple months, that Congress will have a short-term reauthorization in there as well. I have to admit, I'm not entirely hopeful that will happen. So the program, technically will be unauthorized for the next couple months. I think it's most likely that we'll have to negotiate some sort of reauthorization in likely December. That's probably the most, we are focusing our efforts now, but just based on where Congress is at and all the change in leadership and so on, I think it's going to be a challenge, uphill climb these next couple days.